Today we're going to review the cleaning of the recycler system at the end of the day. We want to make sure that the operators understand that the operator manuals are very critical to understanding what you're doing. And don't rely on somebody else telling you one thing without you referring to the manual to make sure that what they're saying is accurate. It's very easy to assume something and not really get the right information. If there are any questions that you have even after reviewing the manual, please contact us. Contact our TM, our service department, to get verification on the information. So today, our intention here is to ensure that you gain optimal performance and reliability out of the recycler system. This happens to be a rear recycler. Vacall produces a front reel recycler. So this is a rear reel, which the maintenance requirements are the same. Just things are positioned a little bit differently as far as the boom is concerned and the hose reel. We have a freshwater system here, 240 gallons, that operates at 1,000 psi, 10 gallon a minute. The purpose for this is for cleaning. Not only cleaning the operator's hands and so forth, but also cleaning the water tanks. The covers across the top, the plugs on top, the plugs on the bottom of these water tanks need to be removed on a daily basis for an inspection process and cleaning. And you need to make sure you remove all residual sediment from the water tanks. So when you start out the next day, you have clean water in the system. We go around to the back side of the truck. And along this side here, we've got 3-inch valves to drain the compartments. Each compartment has the ability to open a drain up, whether it's a plug in the bottom or a valve on the side. All of these valves and plugs need to be opened to be able to flush the sediment that could be in the tanks. The tanks are lined with material to guard against corrosion and facilitate the cleaning of the tank. As you move around the truck, you will see in this particular case, we've got our control panel at the rear of the machine, but the functions of the control panel are the same as we have on the front reel machine. We have a vacuum flush, we have a main filter flush, we have a tank filter flush, and a tank flush. So these buttons are very critical to maintaining the system, especially the vacuum flush and the main filter flush, which is the cyclonic filter on the front of the debris tank. Those can be operated anytime during the day, especially when there's a differential pressure above 1.0. The system will run up to 1.5 and then go into red. And that basically is telling you that it's not functioning properly and that you would need to go to a vacuum flush and then a main filter flush to be able to bring that level down. What causes the level to increase would be sediment, grit, high grit content in the material you're bringing in, and also grease. If you're into a grease line, sewer line, where grease is built up, grease can plug the filter that does the filtration for the water recycling side of the system. The recycling filter takes the contamination level down to 100 micron, low enough to ensure good pump packing life. Now, if we go along this side further, we'll find that we have similar valves, plugs, caps on top of the water tank, and all of those need to be removed as we mentioned before, and these tank sections need to be cleaned with high pressure water from the freshwater system. At the beginning of the shift, you should have fresh water in the water tanks. This valve will be closed because water can basically exit through this system here without the valves being closed. Before you start the water pump at the beginning of the day, you need to ensure you've got your water supply open and you also open this drain up. That will ensure if there's any residual contamination in this line that it gets cleaned out of the system. Once you see clean water, you may not see any contamination at all, but should you see contamination, you'll run and open this valve up until you see clear water passing through it. Then you're good to go to start the water pump. When you're dealing with these water tanks and cleaning the water tanks, if you don't remove these plugs in the bottom of the water tank, there is a possibility of having a buildup of material in here over time that could break free unexpectedly and get passed through the water pump. If you're talking about this section here, closest section to the charge pump and the water pump. So one other reason to pull these plugs out, besides facilitating you being able to clean the sections adequately. Once we're done with the water tanks and we're satisfied that they're clean, we need to plug them up, put all the covers back on, and fill them with fresh water. We're going to go back to the control panel, and we're going to put the machine in pump mode, of course, so that we can operate the water pump. We're going to do a vacuum flush. We're going to do a main filter flush. Then we're going to dump the debris tank. And what that'll allow us to do is get rid of all the debris that might be in the tank, plus the vacuum flush will pull any residual dirty water into the debris tank before we dump. So once we dump the debris tank, then we go through flushing process. Again, this time we're going to flush the main tank filter. We're going to flush the tank itself to ensure that we have the tank clean. A good practice is to lower the debris tank, close the tailgate, turn the tank flush on again at full RPM, at full pump flow, and let the water just create turbulence inside the debris tank to help remove any residual material that might remain. Once you do that, shut down the system, dump your debris again, and that should ensure that you're clean enough to start the next day. Now, you're using fresh water to do this, and so that accomplishes, a couple of things for us. It gets rid of the gray water or dirty water out of the system, plus helps us start the next day out with a clean system. You should always start the next day with fresh water in the water tanks. And before you start, you do a vacuum flush and you do a main filter flush. That's again to ensure that if there's any residual material in from previous day's work, you get that pulled into the debris tank. After that is completed, you drain the rest of your system basically. You're going to prepare it for winterization, especially. You need to ensure that you air purge all the circuits to get rid of all the water that are in each individual circuit so that you don't have any freezing issues. If you want to actually add more to that, to add more insurance, you should introduce RV antifreeze into the system so that you guard against any potential freezing of the main water pump especially. The other practice that you need to follow is weekly introduce bleach into the water tanks. And you should do that when you have clean water in the tanks. And that'll ensure that you control any pH imbalance in the material or the water that's in there and help keep any possible buildup of algae or anything of that nature in the water tanks that could cause issues down the road. Additionally, if you are working with the machine in grease, you should introduce to the freshwater system Dawn dish detergent, for example. Use it sparingly because it really foams considerably, and that will help wash out the recycler side. And of course, anytime you are dealing with the recycler side, you should always high pressure flush the main filter and do a vacuum flush on the entire system. And you may need to do that a couple of times to ensure that you've gotten everything out of there that you introduced. We want to recap what we've talked about. primary purpose of this video is to ensure that everyone understands what's necessary on a daily basis. At the end of the day, the water tanks need cleaned. The plugs need to be removed from the water tank bottom and also the caps from the top so you can inspect what's inside the water tanks. The machine has a 10 gallon a minute, 1000 psi pressure washer that uses fresh water to be able to facilitate cleaning the water tanks. Once the water tanks are clean, they're to be filled with fresh water after you plug everything up and put your caps back on. And that fresh water is to be used to flush your main system, your main filtration system. You do a vacuum purge to pull any residual contaminated water out of the recycling system. That forces that to be dumped into the debris tank. Then you do a high pressure flush, which uses fresh water. Once you're finished with that process, you would then dump your debris tank. You would go through and fresh water flush your main filter in your debris tank, wash the debris tank itself with the tank flush circuit, and then my suggestion is to lower the debris tank, close the tailgate, turn the tank flush on at full pump flow and full pressure, and let that turbulence help do a final rinse of the debris tank. Then you would dump that out as well at the end of the day. You want to ensure that you have fresh water in the system to start the next day out, and before you actually work the machine, you should do a vacuum flush and a main cyclonic filter flush. And then you should ensure before you start the main water pump that you crack open the drain valve in the water line feeding the pump to ensure that it's just clean water coming out of there before you fire up the water pump. Another area that you need to be looking at on a daily basis, if you run the truck for 8 hours, especially this circuit right here, once you accumulate 8 hours of time, you would need to pull the strainer out of here and clean the strainer. This says every 8 hours. That would be 8 hours of operation. You would just have to figure that you would probably use this water pump possibly an hour a day. So you're looking about every 8 to 10 days where you need to pull this filter out. And lastly, all of this is intended to maintain the best reliability and the best performance out of the main flushing pump. The manufacturer of the pump recommends a repack at 500 hours of operation. Basically, to achieve that, you have to ensure that you perform these cleaning and flushing operations on a daily basis. Otherwise, it's going to shorten the pump packing life and it will increase your cost of operation. Hello, my name is John Monaco. I am here with Papé Machinery, Construction and Forestry. I have been connected to the Vacall product both from the manufacturer's level and as a Papé employee for the past 14 years.